Hey everybody, Dr. Martin Hart here with Microbalance. Today we're talking about parasites. We're looking like when you're not getting better, are we looking at parasites? But really, when are parasites symbiotic? When are they helpers? So before we jump into the topic tonight though, I do need to just say real quick, tonight's information is not meant to diagnose, treat, cure medical illness. It is purely for informational, educational purposes only. Okay, so remember that this is for you to learn and educate yourselves on. Okay guys, let's start getting ready for the topic here as people are joining in. We're going to talk about parasites, one of the hidden causes of illness. But last week, or last Instagram Live, we talked about how parasites are opportunists, how they show up when the opportunities are right? When the environment is right for them to show up, just like weeds in our garden. When there's not enough other flowers or plants, they show up. The same thing happens with parasites. When there's room for them, they come in. But this time we're talking about when parasites are symbiotic, when they're actually helping us. Okay? So this is really important because many of us will have parasites, but they're not actually hurting us. They are helping us. And so as we do this tonight, I really want to make sure you guys put all your questions in so we can answer any of them. I've got some questions that people have emailed in or sent in earlier that I'll be answering. But tonight, when parasites are helpers. So let's jump in on this. A lot of people don't recognize that parasites are still everywhere to be found in the modern age. Okay, they're in soil. We find them underneath people's fingernails all the time. They're in the drinking water. If you have well water, like if you live out in the country, they're very frequently out there. I know it sounds gross, but that's where they're at. They're in creeks. They're in rivers. They're in ponds. Sometimes they're even in swimming pools. Okay, pets. Many of our pets will have them. Livestock. Sushi, okay, is full of parasites. So these are all great ways to get worms, flukes, protozoas, all sorts of different types of parasites you can get from all these sources. Now, what are they doing to us? Well, for some of us, they're creating extra histamine like allergies. They're creating major digestive issues, bloating, indigestion, poor nutrient absorption. They can cause all of that. They're also causing inflammation. Okay, they're going to create an inflammatory state, or what we'll find out tonight, how do they create a micro anti-inflammatory state in certain ways? They can affect our neurotransmitters, creating depression, anxiety, all sorts of crazy things like that. Dealing with autoimmune disease. Sometimes people even relate them to diabetes, things like that. Okay? Now, we talked about their opportunists last time. I showed up the opportunities right. But what if our body invites them in? Okay? So there's actually times when parasites are helpful to us and our body will allow them to come in because we're exposed to them all the time. Okay, we're getting them all the time. And so when we're exposed to those parasites, what's actually happening is with sometimes our body will say, hey, come on in here, stay in. Why? Because you're toxic. Okay, you've accumulated a lot of toxicity, and parasites can actually hold way more toxins. And heavy metals, they can hold up to 230 times. 230 times as many heavy metals in their cells as we can hold in ours. Okay, so if you're heavy metal toxic, for instance, your body will allow those parasites to come in and allow them to hold some of those heavy metals for us. We also see this with different environmental and plastic toxins like PCBs and different things like that, where they accumulate, they hyperaccumulate in parasites, so the parasites can actually scavenge those toxins from us. Okay, they'll hold them much more than we hold in our cells or even the environment because they're good at that. They're tolerable at that. What's another toxin, especially one that Microbalance and I talk a lot about? Mold, mycotoxins. Those parasites can hold mycotoxins for us and scavenge them away so our cells aren't so damaged by them. So when you're hyperaccumulating toxins and you're what they call bioaccumulating these toxins in the environment, whether it's from mold or heavy metals or PCBs or plastics or dioxins, parasites will come in. Our body will say, come on in, please help us out. Okay? We've seen this in all sorts of other ways, right? We actually seen this in the last decade or so in wars, where in like the Middle Eastern wars, we've asked other terrorist groups to actually help us a little bit as a U.S., to help us on that front in those local areas. Our bodies will allow parasites to come in and be symbiotic, meaning they're helpful for us and them, so they can hold these toxins for us. Okay? This is also why you shouldn't just indiscriminately, if you have parasites, go killing those parasites. So when we test patients, when I find a parasite, my next question is, why are they there? So I may not go having them do a parasite cleanse right away. I may have them detoxify first because it's really the toxicity that's allowing the parasites to be there. So look, if you've got parasites and you start killing them and you feel terrible, it may be because your body was holding on to them for a reason, and so they're dying and they're releasing all these toxins and all this toxicity and heavy metals in your system, and suddenly you're going, oh, I feel terrible, I'm horrendous, I should be feeling better. It's because your body wasn't ready to let them go. And so instead of clearing them out and feeling better, you're feeling worse because now you've got so many toxins circulating that they were holding, and now your body has no buffer like it had before. Okay? That's a big deal. You got to do this in the right steps. Okay? Your body has an order of operation, has a set order it wants to go in. And killing parasites, I'll tell you what, is usually not first. Okay? So full moon cleanses are great, parasite cleanses are great, but I want you to think about when and why should you do them. Okay? So, are you toxic? Then don't start with parasites. Okay? Start with detoxifying. That's important. If you're being exposed to mold, don't start with parasites. Start with getting away from the mold and clearing the toxicity. Now, what's another way or another reason that we'll hold on to parasites? That will keep parasites around when we're extra toxic, okay? Or we'll keep parasites around when we're overloaded with parasites, Inflammation, right? Autoimmune conditions. When our body is having this hyperimmune response and it's creating all this inflammation, parasites will actually secrete anti-inflammatory and immune-modulating chemicals. Okay, it's almost like stealth bombers. Okay, in the military, they're blind to radar because they're putting out counter signals. Same thing's happening with these worms and these parasites. They're actually lowering inflammation around them and then allowing the system to calm down a bit. And so we find this where certain gastrointestinal parasites can actually help on a certain degree to things like Crohn's or all sort of colitis. Okay, and so it's really true. They do help with inflammation issues. Now it depends, right, on what's happening, but they'll actually secrete anti-inflammatory compounds, especially with autoimmune conditions and hyperinflammation in the gut, and the body will keep them there because they're suppressing this inflammatory event. And so the body's trying to create a balance, right? The body's always intelligent. It's always making the best decisions it can with the information it's been given, okay? So if you have a massive autoimmune condition that the body's hyper-responding to inflammation and says, look, I've got this other thing I'm dealing with. So an autoimmune condition is when the immune system is trying to attack either toxins or infections in the cells. And so it looks like it's attacking itself. It's intelligent, okay? It's not attacking itself. It's trying to find the infections or toxins. And so the body's saying, hey, look, I'm over here dealing with this mission. I'm over here dealing with these invaders. I'm going to let these other guys come in and handle the background inflammation that I'm creating so that it can lower some of these inflammatory loads in the body, right? So it's actually this dual effect of we're going to help you deal with toxins, we're going to help you deal with inflammation, right? And so the body will not let those parasites go. You can do parasite cleanses all day long, month after month, week after week, maybe passing parasites, maybe not. But if you're not dealing with toxicity and you're not dealing with inflammation first, so then your body's going to not let these parasites go. It says, hey, cut that out. I need these guys, okay? Because you have to work in this order of operation. And you're actually what we call hamstringing yourself. We're actually slowing yourself down instead of helping yourself out. So somebody says in here, how can you tell if your issues are mold related? Well, that's important because if you have mold, you have toxins, that may be why you have parasites. So you can do quite a few things. You can do a urine mold test. Microbalance has these great EC3 plates. They're test plates. Okay, got some like a test plate on there. And they actually allow you to test the air. They allow you to test clothing, the carpet. I have people test mattresses. People's mattresses are disgusting. Okay, and that's not anybody's fault. Sometimes we get in there after a long day. We don't shower first. But it'll create lots of mold setup, which then toxicity from that mold allows you to accumulate toxins, which then the parasites come in and hold those toxins. Now, here's a fun experiment, okay? And this is more for informational purposes again, but we're doing with these EC3 plates. Get a sterile Q-tip from like the drugstore, okay? Put it up in there, swab around, okay, on both sides. Wipe it on those mold plates from EC3, from Microbalance. Let it grow for 3 to 5 days. Some people's noses are growing tons of mold. Now, some of that is because the nose hairs are catching it for us, and that's great, but that still tells us you're being exposed to a ton. So the doctors here at Keystone, the doctors and I, We have patients do this all the time, and it shows you quite a bit. Maybe we need to do a sinus clearance to get that stuff out. So if you're dealing with those and you have parasites, we know, well, we need to really deal with the mold or the toxicity before I deal with the parasites. Okay, so that's a biggie on that front. Somebody else asked, if I have sears, where does parasites clearing fit in that? Beginning, end, does it matter? In the end. Okay, in the end. So sears, you get away from the exposure, right? Chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So you get away from the exposure. You open up the detox channels. You deal with the effects of the mold. After you've dealt with that toxicity and the inflammation from the mold, then you can clear the parasites if they're still there or a problem. This is actually a homeopathy principle from Samuel Hahnemann, the founder who was an MD, started homeopathy. He found that purging parasites early on was a bad idea. You actually had to deal with the effects of the body that was allowing parasites to get there. So what we're talking about today, last time we talked about the opportunities like stomach acid imbalances, things like that to allow them to get there. Today we're talking about how inflammation and toxicity allow them to get there because they actually support your body in dealing with those things. So until you've dealt with that inflammation and that toxicity, clearing parasites won't matter. And then when you do deal with those, sometimes you don't have to clear them at all. And then sometimes it's very easy to clear them at that point. So definitely the end. So how do we decrease inflammation? It increases by emotional reasons even. That is so true, okay? So some of the things that secrete emotion, or they secrete emotion, they secrete inflammation are mast cells, okay? Mast cells secrete different inflammatory compounds like leukotrienes, prostaglandins, histamine, right? That raise inflammation. What are the two main causes of that? Well, I see that mold is the biggest cause. And then number two is parasite infections after you've dealt with the secondary cause that causes secondary inflammation later. But what's really interesting about those mast cells is they have a receptor for stress hormones on them, right? So when you're stressed, you will release more inflammation from the nervous system, okay? The nervous system, the hypothalamus up in the brain and gland here, will release a little hormone called CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone. That's actually on that mast cell, there's a receptor for that. So that gets that, you get stress, you get that, it releases histamine. This is why you can get flustered or stressed, you'll turn red. It's a histamine release, right? You'll get flushed, you'll get stressed, etc. So you've got to deal with your stress. I'll just be blunt. You've got to deal with it somehow. We like tapping. We teach tapping. We do emotional release. The doctors and I here, we do emotional release sessions with our patients and clients, whether that's virtually, whether that's in person. We got to help process those trapped emotions. Okay, then you can look at different things, different supplements that help to stabilize inflammation. So if it's what we call centrally mediated, if it's in the central immune system in the brain, dealing out the CRH release, you can look at things like Celltropin, homeopathic spray, or Sinus Defense 2.0 that are both anti-inflammatory and brain stabilizing to deal with that point, okay? And then there's other compounds like quercetin, for some people turmeric, ashwagandha, things like that to deal with that. But really you got to deal with the underlying thing, which may be stress for some people. What can you do for babies who have parasites and mold passed on from their mother? Baby is so constipated. This is really important. I get a lot of pediatric cases. Dr. Aoki in the office gets a lot of pediatric cases that they have parasites. They test for parasites when we test them. And so we know we've got to deal with that. They've got mold from mom or maybe from the house. Please, 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 please test your house if you're dealing with mold. Plate test it, ERMI test it, EMA test it, whatever you need to do it. Test the house, figure out what's going on. Okay. So for those kiddos though, once we've cleared the toxicity, we've helped them deal with the mold, those babies can take micro doses of binders. They do great with homeopathics. Really, really, really well with homeopathics, okay? I see kids do fantastic with those. And then they can get on binders. And then when it's time to clear the parasites, those kids do fantastic with very low dose herbs, okay? They do great with drops, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops 2 or 3 times a day with herbs, and then probiotics. Now, if they're constipated, this is important for parasites, this is important for detox, it's important for mold clearing. Get their bowels moving. Get them little tummy massages. Check out their diet. Do you, if you're breastfeeding, need to remove some things from your diet? Does your baby need to remove some things from the diet? Give them belly massages every day with a little bit of castor oil. You can give them a little bit of MCT oil. You can give them magnesium to get their bowels moving, okay? So that's really, really, really important. Today's the full moon. Is increased symptoms a dead giveaway for parasites? Is there any harm in parasite cleansing if you're not sure? There is harm in parasite cleansing if you're not sure. Because if those parasites might be there because of inflammation or toxicity, and you start clearing them, you may create a huge inflammation bomb or a huge toxicity release. But if you have increased symptoms around full moon, a couple reasons. Could be parasites. Why? Because with the full moon, okay, this is really important to note, okay, because it's not what you think, okay? Around the full moon for humans, we shift away from melatonin and towards serotonin. Serotonin in our bodies, in our brains and gut, turns into melatonin. So we actually, around the full moon, we make less melatonin, we have more serotonin. Serotonin stimulates parasites. It stimulates parasites to reproduce, it stimulates parasites to breed, stimulates parasites to move, to grow, to develop. Okay, so we get more parasitic activity around the full moons because of that serotonin. Okay, and so what we may need to do around that time is balance serotonin if you're not ready for a parasite cleanse. But if patients are ready for a parasite cleanse, then they can do an upregulated parasite cleanse around the full moon. Sometimes I have some patients only do parasite work around the full moon. If you're not sure and you want to do something to support it without just blasting the waters, you can do a few drops of Citri drops, like 3 times a day, like 3 to 5 drops of Citri drops. That's what I would do. Not medical advice, but it's what I would personally do. 3 to 5 drops of Citri drops in your water 3 times a day, day of, or day before, day of, day after the full moon. It is the full moons. I could see it last night coming through, getting ready for that full moon. It's going to be big tonight. Big, big, big. So guys, some of the other questions we had on the emails here, and as I'm pulling these emails up, again, parasites can be symbiotic. They can help us when we're overloaded with toxins. They can help us when we are over inflammation, especially with autoimmune conditions, okay? So what are some of these questions we have going on? What's the connection between mold and parasites? Toxicity. Toxicity, inflammation. They're going to help us deal with that. So when you have those, it's going to set you up. And then we talked about this last time. Mold weakens your immune system and throws your digestion off. It's going to be a great opportunity for parasites. So either the parasites are helping you or mold makes you weak, allowing the parasites to be in there. Let's see what else some of these questions is. Walking in barefoot dirt can create issues. Yes. Okay. Now, if you've seen any of my reels, I love grounding. Grounding is so important. We need to be in contact with the earth. But it is true that soil is a great place for parasites. So what do? Wash your feet after. Okay. Don't make sure you don't have any cuts on your feet when you're walking barefoot. That's a great way to get parasites. So wash your feet after and keep your immune system topped up and keep your digestive system working. Keep yourself free of mold and other toxins. Okay. That's how you want to get barefoot, because I still want you grounding. And grounding in socks works. Okay. Do parasites live on surfaces in a moldy environment? Do moldy environments have parasites? Yes, 1,000%. If mold can grow there, parasites can grow there. Okay? Maybe not on concrete and things like that, but soil, damp, wet areas, things like that, food for sure. Where in the process do you clear Candida? One of the last things I clear is Candida for the same reasons. Candida is usually a reaction to opportunities or a reaction to toxicity. Okay? It is very rarely a thing in of itself. So if you don't have enough good bacteria, Candida would show up to take that space in the environment. That's not a bad thing necessarily, because you don't want bare ground in your gut, but it will start to cause problems as secondary. Everything has a consequence. Okay, so we clear Candida after we've rebuilt the gut, repaired the gut. We clear Candida after we've removed the toxins, because otherwise it will keep coming back. This is why people get all that armpit Candida, all the armpit fungus, etc. is because those lymphatics are trying to clear things out, and the lymph is trying to buffer. Okay. If you're still living in mold, should you wait on tackling parasites? Oh, 1,000%. If you're in mold, parasites need to wait. Okay. Sometimes I'll do some things to keep parasites at bay to balance them out. You're welcome, Trina. And so sometimes I'll do some things to keep parasites at bay, not a full cleanse, just to keep them balanced, right? Because they are wanting to survive too. So they'll take extra opportunities they can get, right? So if they're kind of saying, hey, you're letting me in to deal with these toxins, how about I steal a little nutrients? How about I take a little bit of this, right? So we don't want to just go blasting them, but we want to keep them at bay at the same time. So sometimes I'll do a little bit of that, but really doing a parasite cleanse on your mold, no. Deal with the toxicity, deal with the inflammation, get out as soon as you can, okay? If you can't get out, what are some opportunities? So look, Here's one thing I use. EC3 we use in the clinic on the tables, on surfaces, sometimes even on my hands, right after patients. Kill the mold as best you can on the surfaces around you. Fog if you can. Use air purifiers. Keep the mold level down. Great, great help. Lamb cow bone broth for keeping the immune system. It does. Bone broth is a great way to bolster the immune system, to heal the gut, to heal connective tissue. Great for the brain, right? Some folks who have histamine issues can't tolerate broth, but for the most part, I love it. It's great. Do a great way later to deal with parasites actually is a bone broth cleanse. Do 3 to 5 days of a bone broth fast. Bone broth and water and salt only is a great way to starve the parasites once you've detoxified and help clear them out. So that's a great one. Thanks for that. That's fantastic. Can you have parasites in your tooth sockets? Yes. It's so gross, but I've had patients culture or have teeth tested or their sockets tested, and there's microscopic or even very small worms living in those parasites. Isn't that gross? But they're there. They're cleaning up dead tissue. They're cleaning up that toxins. They're, what do you think when you see like rotting things? There's worms. Why? The worms are cleaning it up. The mold is cleaning it up. And that's what's happening. So if you've got decaying tissue, you're not taking good care of your teeth, or there's teeth that are rotting, or you have cavitations, parasites will come in there and want to clean that up. So you'll have to get in there and clean that out. Histamine issues prevent me from doing a lot of health trends. So true. Here, the doctors and I here at Keystone, we work with super sensitive patients, histamine, mast cell patients all the time. You got to address that first. What does that mean? Addressing inflammation first. Addressing histamine first. Stabilize it. It's a little bit of a tiptoe. Stabilize histamine. Work on some of the toxicity to allow the histamine to calm down. Stabilize histamine a little bit more. Do a little more detox. Back and forth. My mast cell histamine patients get better over time, but you've got to work on the cause, the root cause, and support the histamine at the same time. So important. And healing is out there, guys. Look, if you're what we call a medical refugee, you've been going from specialist to specialist, and you're wandering around looking for help, and nobody has answers and keeps shoving you along, there is hope out there. Okay? We deal with those medical refugees every day who are wandering the medical wilderness looking for help. There's help out there. You got to keep learning and keep searching for somebody who can help you. Okay? Somebody who's going to do that investigative medicine. Somebody who's looking for solutions. Microbalance Health. They're out there looking for solutions for mold patients and patients dealing with other health issues. Okay? The doctor's not here at Keystone. We're out there doing everything we can do with each case, taking each case individually, because there's hope out there. How do we clear them out of teeth? Honestly, sometimes you got to have, if that tooth is dead and rotting, or it's a root canal, it may have to get pulled out. Okay? Then there's lots of different rinses you can do on that. You can even put citra drops right on that area, on that tooth. You can put ozonated oil. You can have a biological dentist do ozone injections. Okay? So that's a biggie. Homeopathy is really good for that. So, but you're going to have to treat that tooth. Essential oils, silver rinses, baking soda rinses, but you might have to pull that tooth out. Okay? I've done some dental rinses with different herbs like Artemisia, different herbs like black walnut, clove. Clove oil is a great anti-parasitic, great for the teeth. You can rinse with it. Okay, doing that. So that's fantastic out there to do those rinses. But the same thing, clear the cause. What's feeding those parasites? Why are they there in that mouth? Well, they're helping clean up rotting tissue. Clear the rotting tissue. Okay, to remove that tooth if you need to. Back off the sugar. Honestly, a good way to help clear the sugar and decay in that, carnivore diet. Okay, great for that. How do parasites affect you emotionally? Can they control your behavior like a puppet? Not like a puppet, but they do influence you. Great book on this is Your Brain on Parasites, okay? I've seen parasite cases that come in, and it's really, I can tell it's affecting neurotransmitters, causing depression. And I've seen it where it will even influence the thoughts that they go to pick up, like if they're ready for a detox or a parasites cleanse, they'll pick up their parasite tincture, and they'll say, I don't think I really need this. Maybe Dr. Hart, maybe Dr. Aoki, maybe they're wrong about that parasite cleanse thing, and I'm just going to forget about it. But then they take it anyways, and those thoughts are gone. Boom. Why? Because it was the parasites creating a neurotransmitter change. They influence our neurotransmitters, thereby creating thoughts. Okay, they want to stay alive. And so they can also rev you up neurotransmitter-wise in the gut, because they're affecting neurotransmitter balance. They're affecting serotonin and GABA in the gut, making you more agitated, making you more emotional, more edgy. Okay, so they really influence that. It's pretty crazy. I actually had one psychologist, she was a therapist, come see me because she had depression. She had Lyme and mold previously, years ago. We cleared her of that. She's doing great for years. Came back, was suffering from a major depression. She tried all the usual therapy things, right? Which I highly recommend. Emotional support, emotional clearing, therapy, counseling, all very good. Trauma therapy. But none of it was working. I tested her. Parasites was the cause, right? And she would be having these sad thoughts, right? Really sad emotionally, that if you've dealt with that dark cloud, that depression, that just deep, deep depression that's there, we'd give her a dropper of the parasite tincture I made for her. Then she's like, I feel like I want to cry. She'd start crying. Give her another dropper. Then she'd be like, almost this thing of like, it was like a sense of desperation, she would describe it as. Like she was desperate. And how could you metaphorically think that? The parasites were desperate to stay alive. One more dropper, totally calm. Like a peace surrounded over here. Why? The parasites were influencing her, wanting her to stay away from the herb, wanting her to kind of stay in that state. Because what do you do when you're depressed? Right? You eat, you lounge around. What a great environment for parasites, okay? Now, afterwards, she was mind blown, okay? Because this totally transformed her professionally. What are you going to do? You're depressed. Your depression might be caused by parasites. I can't talk therapy you out of that. Now, here's what I'll tell you. There's always an emotional component to every illness I see. Always an emotional component. So you want to deal with the emotions no matter what. But when parasites are the cause, you need to deal with the parasites. And you need to ask, why are the parasites there? Are they opportunistic? Then deal with the opportunities. Are they symbiotic? Are they there because of toxicity, inflammation? Deal with the toxicity, inflammation. Then you can deal with parasite cleanse if need be. Let's go down here. There's one. Should I buy a new mattress if I've mold remediation in my home and had mold damages? You need to test it. Get the mold EC3 plates. Test your mattress and see. Okay. Fabric is sometimes difficult to save, but you can fog the snot out of it with the EC3 solution, HEPA vacuum it, retest it, and see. Okay? Sometimes you can save the mattresses. Does everyone that's dealt with mold need to have a parasite cleanse? Not everyone, but I'll tell you, it's probably in the 75% range of my patients who've had mold have parasites. Okay? Any connection between mold, parasites, and Alzheimer's? Yes. Okay. Now, first of all, research has shown that a lot of Alzheimer's patients, when they do cadaver research on their autopsies on their brain, have parasites in their brain that also have Lyme disease in them. Okay. But what's driving that toxicity? What's driving some of those for those folks? Alzheimer's. Mold toxicity is driving that brain to shrink on that level and to be sometimes insulin resistant. Okay. Alzheimer's, their brain has a hard time using sugar for fuel, and so that it shrinks because they're not getting fuel. Now, I've treated a lot of mold-induced dementia. What happened was they had a brain scan, their primary care provider and the neurologist diagnosed them with Alzheimer's. We test them, the urine is out the wazoo with mycotoxins. We test their house, it's moldy. We get them out of the house, we detoxify them, we clear them. Maybe at the end we do a parasite cleanse. Their brain starts coming back on board. Could you imagine having dementia, Alzheimer's, and you start getting your memory back, right? That's going to buck the whole model, right? It just buck that whole cart. And so you've got to look at those things and look at real root causes. Is there a relationship with mold and cancer? Okay, before I answer this one, I just want to reiterate, not medical advice, educational purposes only. Yes, research shows some molds and mycotoxins are carcinogenic. They cause and or promote mold and cancer. So what a lot of times, for instance, breast cancer, it's lymph stagnation, chronic toxicity, dripping that lymph system. What's a major lymph congester? What's a major toxin? Mold. Now, on top of that, you add in the molds that are hormone disruptors, and then the molds that are carcinogenic. You got a perfect recipe for hormonal cancers like breast cancer, ovarian cancer, testicular cancer. That's crazy. Are the oncologists talking about this? No. Right? Now, here's what's really crazy. Some of the oncology journals, the cancer journals, they talk about DIM, diindolylmethane, as an anti-cancer agent, helps cancer. Guess what? It also helps to allow mold to detoxify in the cells. Is there a correlation there? Is there a relationship? Yep, you bet so. So if you know somebody dealing with that, test the house for mold. You don't want them living in it. So it's really important to know. Guys, we're getting close to the end here. We're talking about how parasites are symbiotic sometimes. Sometimes they help us with things like inflammation, autoimmune conditions, toxicity, mold. right? And so we need to address those things first before we do a parasite cleanse. That's really important. Where can I get something to test myself and my home? Microbalance has tests for the home. They've got EC3 mold plates, okay, that you can do on the home. You can tap test, you can air test with them. They have the EMA test you can use to help test that. That's important. You can even play around with a swab test up the nose, put on the plate, see what's going in your nose. That's really fun to do. At the clinic here, the doctors and I, we use urine mycotoxin testing. We use biofeedback testing. We use different home testing as well, mixed with the plates to figure out what's going on in that front. We use stool testing too for parasites. What sort of parasite treatment do you recommend? How do we treat the parasites? Here's a really good way to treat parasites. Two things. Let me grab these here. Okay. So one of them is citri drops. This is actually antifungal, antiparasitic. You can put it in water, put it on food, write it down. You can put it in sinus rinses. Guys, I didn't talk about this. Parasites can get in your sinuses. Okay, they can be in your lungs, they can be in your sinuses. We've had some patients do some sinus rinses with antiparasitics. The grossest stuff comes out. Okay, it's true but gross. Okay, so citri drops, that's a big one. And then we've got Sinus Defense 2.0. Okay, the spray. That spray has homeopathic nosodes for some different types of parasites and fungus and bacteria and all sorts of good stuff. Those are really good ways. Different herbs I like: mimosa, artemisia, black walnut, Macula palmifera is another one. Those are all sorts of good antiparasitics, but really treat the root cause. Are they symbiotics? Or are you toxic, inflamed, autoimmune? Deal with those. Are you opportunistic? Get your gut right. Get your stress balance right. Get your mold clearance right? Deal with the root cause, then do a parasite cleanse. And coffee enemas on all fronts. Coffee enemas are great. They help you detoxify. They help clear mold. They help clear parasites. Flush those things out. Okay? Those are all big. I've done the Q-tips in my nose. It was very fun. It's maybe not fun doing it in the time being, but it's really neat to see what's growing in there. Okay? So that's really good. Yeah, the plates are really, really easy to use, guys. So many of my patients use them. Put them out in the air. I recommend you turn a fan on when you use them to really stir that stuff up, because it's what's circulating that's important. Tap test your carpets. Carpets are gross. Tap test your upholstery furniture. Tap test upholstery furniture. Tap test your clothes. Okay? Because this is important, because if your clothes are moldy, then you're going to get exposed every time you change and put them on. And then if they are, you can use the EC3 laundry additive to clear them out. Okay? What about in children and babies? How do you test? Okay, you can do a urine mycotoxin test for some of those kiddos. We do an organic acids test through the diapers. You can use there's a diaper kit, collection kit you can use to help us see if they're dealing with mold exposure, or there's a stool sample for parasites, or in the office, the doctors and I, we use biofeedback testing on pediatrics all the time. Okay, and so they just use lower doses of similar herbs. Citri drops are great. Homeopathics like the Sinus Defense of Celtropin, kids tolerate those really, really, really well. Yeah, I agree with you. Microbalance products are fantastic. We love them. Use them all the time at home, in the office. So Hello Velo saying, have you used the new EC3 wipes? We talked about this a little bit earlier. Totally use the wipes in the office. It's great too. So I talked a little about, you're going out, you're getting exposed, you're changing dirty diapers, you're changing the cat litter in the cat box. That's a really, oh my gosh, cat litter, cat poop is full of parasites, toxoplasmosis. People get it from that. It actually is a big cause of miscarriages, okay? So you got to clean up afterwards. Wash your hands, use EC3 wipes. You're outside walking around barefoot doing your grounding. Come in afterwards, wipe your feet off with the wipes. It's great antifungals, keep your home mold free. Great way to do it. They smell great. It's not overpowering at all. They work well. Love it. Yeah, they're super functional, easy to use. You want an all-natural cleaner wipe that's going to get the fungus. It's going to be antiparasitic. Grab the wipes. Guys, thank you so much for participating. If you like this, please share it with people. If you're looking for a good source of some great mold products, check out Microbalance. If you're looking for a great practitioner, check out Keystone Total Health. The doctors and I are here, happy to help. So take care. Check out the next one that we'll do. Send questions in if you have them. Happy to answer. Check out the blogs on sinusitis wellness. Take care, y'all.